I hope everybody's feeling good about the test, feeling good about where you are in terms of your preparation. I know it's probably a little bit of nerves, but I also think that you guys have made a lot of progress and worked really hard, and I'm sure people are going to do really well. So what we're going to do today is basically a lot of review type stuff. We're going to do some math review here in a little bit. We're also going to do some different verbal stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about continuing to improve your vocabulary, and then we'll do some practice verbal questions. We may have time to do a reading comp passage as well. We might not. Give me a smiley face if you got my email this morning with all of the handouts. Okay, good. So everybody's got those. That's fantastic. And we're also going to talk a little bit about what to do between now, especially given the fact that the course is ending, and the day that you take the actual test. So what to do in terms of continuing your studying, what to prepare for, what to focus on in terms of strengths and weaknesses, all of that good stuff. But before we do any of this, we still haven't really talked about the argument essays. And I apologize for that. We normally do them in class 7. We got a little bit behind, so I definitely want to spend at least the first 15 or 20 minutes talking about the argument essays and how they're different from the issue essays. So if you guys remember, we talked a couple of weeks ago about the issue essays. And the issue essays are really asking you to very specifically give your opinion about some sort of topic or quotation that they're presenting to you. But the argument essays are actually doing something very, very different. They're asking us to analyze and then critique the logic of an argument that they're presenting to us in the prompt. So quick reminder about the essays. You're going to get 2 essays. One's the issue, one's the argument. Each is 30 minutes long for a grand total of an hour. Those essays come first. They're not extremely important because they don't factor into your overall score. You're going to get that math score and that verbal score, and that is what is most important to the schools that you're applying to. These scores right here, math and verbal. Instead, the essays are scored on a separate scale. It goes from a 0 to a 6. And the way they make that work is they have 2 people read each of your essays, and each person gives you a score from 0 to 6. So you get 4 separate scores, 2 for each essay, and then they add them up and divide by 4 and just round up in half-point increments. So it's basically the average of all 4 scores in half-point increments. The importance of the essay, I think, is a little bit dependent on the type of program that you're applying to. A lot of graduate programs are going to care a lot more about your application essay or your personal statement or your statement of purpose or research statement, depending on the type of programs that you're applying to. Probably some of the programs that are very heavy on the writing, especially writing for a deadline. Things like a journalism program or maybe a creative program, writing program might care a little bit more about this essay. But most of the schools aren't going to be focused too strongly on your essay score. That being said, we want to do well enough that we don't scare anybody. We don't want to ruin our chances of getting in by getting a 0 or a 1. We want to do good enough that we get a pretty decent score, somewhere in the range of a 4 or a 5 or so. And these essays are not graded very harshly. It's not that tough to get a decent score on the essays. So let's talk a little bit about how the analysis of an argument essay is different from the issue essay. So the main difference here is this right here. You're not being asked to give your own opinion on the topic. Instead, they're asking you to discuss how logical, how much an argument makes sense. And Truly an argument, just like we talked about when we did that in class 7, when we did those short reading passages, truly an argument in the sense that you're going to get an author's conclusion. It's going to be supported by different premises, and there's going to be problems with that. There's going to be broken links between the premises and the conclusion. In other words, the premises might prove one thing, but the conclusion is concluding something else. Or there may be other sort of logical or scientific problems with it. And so what we're trying to do is to figure out, deconstruct in some way the argument itself. So figure out what the conclusion is, figure out what supports that conclusion, and try to understand how they work together. And then look for places where there's a problem, where there's a flaw, where there's broken logic. Especially look out for things like assumptions that the author is making. Look for problems that you can show a counterexample to. So if the author's concluding X, given a series of facts, show how it's just as likely that it might be Y instead. Come up with counterexamples. And finally, the instructions accompanying the topic are actually pretty important. It used to be that they used the same set of instructions for every prompt. But since they've switched to the new version of the GRE, they now have a set of about 8 different instructions that have slightly more specific information about precisely what they want you to do for each of the topics. And so you want to pay attention to that and make sure you're not writing for the wrong topic. Make sure that you're really focused on the instructions that they've provided. And I'll show you guys in a little bit some examples of what some of those instructions might look like. But first, let's see an example of an actual prompt. So here we've got this prompt. We've got Blodgett City needs money to repair its crumbling roads, so the mayor has proposed a plan to increase tourism by subsidizing the cost to tourists of hotel stays in Blodgett City. Since hotel stays in Blodgett City will then be cheaper than hotel stays in Renton City, the mayor has stated that the subsidy is the best way to fund road repair. I'll give you guys a few seconds to let that sink in and think about it. Start thinking about what the author is saying and what evidence the author is using to say it. Okay, what do you guys think is the main point, the conclusion? What does the author want us to believe? Or perhaps in this case, what does the mayor want us to believe? Okay, cheaper hotels will increase tourism. Specifically, though, what's the mayor telling us? Yeah, I think that's what the mayor is trying to say, but be real specific. What's the actual, literal, word-for-word conclusion the mayor's making? Because in real life, it's helpful for us to be able to interpret and analyze and kind of paraphrase an argument. But a good first step here is not to paraphrase at all, to get really focused on the precise wording they use, because the precise wording is often where we're going to find the problems. Okay, the subsidy is the best way to fund road repair. I agree with that. I agree with you completely there. What do you think is a really interesting word that they've used in that sentence? Yeah, I'd agree with that, Catherine. That seems like a strong phrase. It's not just one way to fund road repair. It's actually the very best way to fund road repair. Watch out for those extreme statements, right? That's a problem right off the bat. Okay? So what evidence does the mayor give us that this subsidy is the best way? Okay, so we've got this information comparing the price of hotel stays, right? we've got this information about we need money to repair crumbling roads, and we've got this idea about subsidizing the cost to tourists of hotel stays. What do you think? Would you vote for this mayor? Does this sound like a good plan? It's pretty bad, isn't it? There's a lot of stuff going on here that we just don't know enough information. You know, tourists aren't going to want to travel in a city that has bad roads. Yeah, it doesn't matter how cheap you make the hotel stays. If Blodgett City sucks, then people aren't going to come. And we already know they've got bad roads, right? Other thoughts? So Jane, I think I kind of summarized what you just said. I agree with you totally. I summarized it as, you know, maybe it will work, but is it the best way? Maybe we should be looking for other solutions. Yeah, Emma, I love that, right? Will the money raised be more than, will the money raised be enough for the road repair? Yeah, I like that. Yeah, Catherine, that's a good point. Maybe the tourist roads are all good, but we need to repair other roads, and the tourists won't even see them, so maybe they'll come to Blodgett. Yeah, and what do you have to do to have a subsidy? What do you have to do to have a subsidy? Okay, so Jane, you have to pay the hotels the difference between what they would charge and what they will now be charging. So in other words, the Blodgett City needs to pay money. They're trying to raise money, and he's talking about paying money. So does that create a problem? Yeah, what happens if we spend $1 million to subsidize these hotel stays, right? And then the increased tourist revenue only brings in $100,000. Yeah, we've got more tourists, but I mean, my big problem with this argument is that the money we're spending is directly spent by the city. But the revenue that we get, how does tourism bring money to the city? Indirectly, right? Through, I guess, taxes and other things. So we're directly spending money to try to increase an indirect revenue. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it, but if it costs us more to subsidize than it does then if it costs us more in subsidies than what we gain in additional tourist revenue in the local economy, we've got a big problem. So what I want you guys to really see about this argument is it's bad, right? This is not a good argument. And this is how these prompts always work. They never give you a good one. They always give you something full of holes, something very problematic. Notice how in just a few seconds we came up with 5 major problems with this argument. 5 major problems. We could pick 2 or 3 of them and write a really strong essay. But I also want you guys to notice what allowed us to do that really well was first we took the step of figuring out the exact wording that they used in the conclusion and figuring out what the facts were that supported it. Put that together, really deconstruct it, and it's going to make it a lot easier to identify the different flaws, the different problems in the original argument, and thus make it a lot easier to write about those problems. So we'll come back to this Blodgett City in a second, but let's take a look at the instructions. Here's two versions of it, right? And it's really important that you pay very careful attention to the instructions because they're different enough that that you'll get a lower score if you're not paying close attention to it. So here we say, write a response in which you discuss what specific evidence is needed to evaluate the argument and explain how the evidence would weaken or strengthen the argument. So with our Blodgett City there, we might discuss how we need more evidence from the mayor about how much the subsidy will cost and how much the increased tourist revenue will bring in. And then we could discuss how if the subsidy is more than the revenue, that weakens the argument, but if the revenue is more than the subsidy, that would actually strengthen it. Or maybe we could use the example of, is it really the best way? What about, should we look for other ways to raise money? And we could talk about how we would like to evaluate specifically what other methods Blodgett City could use in order to fund road repair. And if those other methods are better, that would weaken this argument. But if they're worse, that would strengthen it. So give me a smiley face if you guys are seeing how I'm transforming what we wrote over here, these problems that we identified, how I'm specifically addressing them based on this particular prompt, this particular instruction. I'm still finding the same basic problems, but I'm crafting my essay to analyze those problems as the instructions tell me to. Here's another version down below. The stated and or unstated assumptions of the argument. How does the argument depend on these assumptions? What are the implications? Right, if we go back, each of these right here can be described as the mayor is assuming that tourists will come to Blodgett if there is subsidized hotel rooms. The mayor is assuming that Blodgett and Renton are comparable. The mayor is assuming that it's not only going to work, but it's actually the best of all possible ways. The mayor is assuming that the money that they will raise will be enough to repair the roads, and so on and so on. Now all of a sudden I'm couching my essay. I'm still talking about the same problems, but I'm couching it in terms of assumptions instead of in terms of specific evidence to evaluate the argument. And by the way, in the handouts that we gave you guys back in class 7, there's a list of all 8 of the different sets of instructions. Questions so far? All right, well, I want to use the next maybe about 10 minutes just to do a blitzkrieg here and show you guys that there are a number of different problems that crop up a lot. So when we're looking for these flaws, we're likely in any given essay prompt to find 2 or 3 or even 4 that we've seen before. Bad assumptions are very common. Problems with statistics, problems with samples, problems with analogies. All these things are mistakes that crop up over and over again. So I want to run through maybe about a dozen of these just to get you guys familiar with them. These are all in your handout as well, including a few more that we won't look at. There's no reason why you have to memorize every single one of these, but my goal is more for you guys to get a feel for the types of problems that crop up a lot on these essays. So for now, we'll stick with Blodgett City. We've seen this one before. And so we can think about this as an unjustified assumption, right? That the mayor assumes that tourists make their decision primarily on the cost of hotels. Or to put it another way, we assume that the tourists decide to come to Blodgett City if the hotels are cheaper. But there's 3 or 4 other unjustified assumptions here. This just happens to be one that we've pointed out. We've also got extreme language. Anytime you see extreme language, be wary. Something is everything. Something is none, right? Something is the best way or the worst way or the biggest or the smallest, right? Look for these extreme words and see whether those extreme words are justified. Maybe if they're in the evidence and the premise, they're fine, but especially if the conclusion uses really extreme language, we should be aware of that. We should watch out for it. Here's another one that shows that pretty commonly. Predicting the future, right? Part of what's going on in this particular argument, it's talking about what's going to happen in the future based on Blodgett City enacting these hotel subsidies. But we don't know what's going to happen, right? What if Blodgett City, collapses in an earthquake? Then they got way bigger problems than repairing their roads. What if Renton City decides to also subsidize hotel stays, right? There's lots of stuff that can happen. And we could write an essay, or at least a paragraph of our essay, discussing this problem, right? That we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and given that we don't know for sure that this really is the best way to fund road repair. Okay, I've got another prompt for you guys and a couple of flaws to look at with it. So let's take about 30 seconds or so to read this, and then I'll let you guys talk to me about it. All right, everybody comfortable with this? Tell me what the conclusion is. What is ABC going to do? Or sorry, XYZ going to do? Now, I don't have children myself, but I would think that bringing children to work might not actually make you very productive. But that's just me. That's just me. Liz, what do you think? If you brought your kids to work every day, would you be more productive or less productive? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Why is XYZ doing this? What's the evidence? What's the premise that supports this policy? All right, so anytime you see this kind of an argument, it worked for one person, therefore it will work for me. Anytime you see that, you've got an automatic, easy flaw to point out. We have no idea whether what works for ABC is going to work for XYZ. We've got a bad analogy. We're drawing a bad analogy. It requires that we assume that ABC and XYZ are very similar, that what works for ABC will work for XYZ. So if your prompt was asking you to discuss assumptions, then you could couch this in they're assuming that these two companies are very similar. But maybe if they're asking you with the prompt to do something a little bit different, maybe you could focus on the counterexample. What if XYZ is very different from ABC? Wouldn't that potentially mean that the policy wouldn't work? So there's something else going on here as well, which is how do we know that ABC's policy reduced employee absences? Yeah, Emma, that's a really good point. It's an indirect assumption about the effectiveness of the policy. We don't actually even know that it's the policy that led to the reduced absences and increased productivity. Maybe something else happened. That's a great point, and we'll get to the causality versus correlation in a little bit. But how do we even know that this is working for ABC? Does the argument tell us that we know this happened? What's our evidence? They published a report, right? They published a report. We don't even have independent evidence We don't even have independent reasons to believe that ABC is even telling the truth, right, about all of this increased productivity and reduced employee absences, right? We don't even know that. They published the report. So we've got a problem there. And look for that. Look for evidence that may not be neutral. Look for evidence that may not be unbiased. And if they're using evidence that's coming from what is arguably a biased source, that's a problem, and we can attack that. We can point that out in our essay. Questions about that? And Emma pointed out actually a really good additional problem, which is the causality. And we're going to get to that real quickly. But just to point out, all we know is they have the policy, and all we know is that they saw, at least according to them, reduced employee absences and increased productivity. We don't actually know that the policy was what caused it. And that leads to our next sample argument. So once again, I'll give you guys about 30 seconds to read through this, and then we'll talk about it. And as always, first step, figure out what the author's conclusion is, figure out what supports that conclusion. Okay, you guys tell me, what is this author, or in this case, this researcher, concluding? I think that's part of the evidence, Caitlin. I think the author is taking that evidence and going to the next step. Yeah, exactly. I think in this case, the author is literally saying the teachers should work to improve children's cardiovascular health. Why? Not because they want to be healthier, but because they want to improve children's reading skills. Isn't that crazy? They want to improve the children's reading skills. And there's another thing I want to point out here. Notice they say because an interest in reading. Not reading skills, but interest in reading. But all of this is part of our evidence, right? Basically, everything other than that last sentence is part of our evidence. There's essentially three pieces that all go together. So the first thing I want you guys to notice is that just because children who score lower on cardiovascular health score lower on reading tests doesn't mean that improving their cardiovascular health will improve their scores on reading tests, right? It may be that children from families that have less money have lower reading test scores and also have lower cardiovascular health. In that case, improving their cardiovascular health isn't going to improve their reading scores because the root problem for both of them is their socioeconomic status. We also might have things in reverse. Maybe it's not that cardiovascular health affects your reading skills. Maybe your reading skills affect your cardiovascular health. We don't know for sure which direction it's going. So anytime you get arguments that are presenting you with two things that go together, right? A correlation. Anytime you see something like that, you got to be really leery before you actually try to make a conclusion that one of those two factors is causing the other. It's actually almost impossible to prove causality conclusively. To give you guys an example of that, this may shock you, but nobody's ever proven that smoking cigarettes causes lung cancer. At least no one's ever proved it to the level that is expected in a scientifically rigorous study. Now, there's so much circumstantial and statistical evidence that everyone agrees that it's the cause, but to truly prove it, you'd have to take one group of people and ensure that they never smoked, and take a second group of people And these two groups have to be randomly selected, and take a second group of people and force them to smoke. And then 20 years later or 30 years later, figure out how many of them in each group got lung cancer. Well, of course, you can't do that kind of a study ethically. So my point is that no one's actually scientifically proven that causality. All we have is a good correlation. Now, I'm being sort of silly here because with the smoking example, the correlation is so good and so statistically strong that nobody, or very few people anyway, doubt it. But the point that I want to make that's bigger is just because two things go hand in hand does not prove that one of them causes the other. Questions about that at all? Potentially, Catherine, a lot of the times you'll get ones like this where they never really discuss the methodology they use. They just say what the researcher discovered. So in this case, it's hard to know whether they made methodological errors or not. On the other hand, if they're asking you to evaluate this argument, like the one of the prompts that we looked at, you could certainly say, I need to know more about the methodology that the researcher used before I'm able to conclude that the researcher's research is good, right? So in a little bit, though, we'll see some examples where it's clearer that there was a methodological error. But if they don't tell you the methodology, you can't say it's a problem, but you can say, I'd like to know more about the methodology because it might be problematic. We need to know how it worked before we make a decision. Does that make sense, the difference there? Yeah. Okay. So here's another one, right? We've also got this problem of skill and will. They're telling teachers that they should work to improve children's cardiovascular health, right? Work to improve children's cardiovascular health. But do we even know whether elementary school teachers are capable of doing that? Do we know whether they have the training to do that? You can't just tell a teacher, hey, you've never taught this before, but we think you should start teaching it. You have to know that the teacher is capable of doing it. And in the absence of that, that's a problem. Anytime you see an author put forth a plan, anytime you see an author put forth a plan to accomplish a goal, whoops, sorry, I jumped one too far ahead. Anytime you see a plan to accomplish a goal, you have to be certain that it's possible to implement the plan, that the people involved are able to do it. And in this case, we don't know that. Questions about this one at all? Anybody spot anything else that we haven't talked about with this one before we move to the next one? I think there's one more big one. Okay, so we don't know where the study was found. I'd agree with that. Bigger than that, though. Always look for places where the words change. In one of the premises, they talk about score lower on reading tests. Okay? They also talk about causes a deficit in reading skills. But what else do they say in the very next premise? Is interest in reading the same thing as reading skills? And so that's an assumption being made, that an interest in reading is the same thing as a reading skill. Right? And without them telling us that, we've got a problem. Okay, let's look at a new one here. Take about 30 seconds as well, and we'll talk about it. Okay, tell me the conclusion again. Yeah, definitely that last sentence. Now, is the evidence good or bad? Yeah, it's very vague, isn't it, right? So they tell us that it was third last quarter. This quarter, they've increased its sales beyond expectations. Yeah, that's a really good point, Jane. We just don't know how much they lost last time. Just because no other sales group has experienced a similar increase, we're trying to compare them to other groups, and we just don't know enough about the other groups, right? We just don't know. I'd agree totally about that. Yeah, and so one of the problems here is that we have really vague terms. Beyond expectations. Who knows what that means? Maybe the expectations are really low. We don't know what a similar increase actually means, right? We don't know for sure if it's not a similar increase, but maybe it's close to the same increase. We really don't know. And then we've also got this issue of not quantifying anything, right? We don't know where they started with. We need numbers, right? We need to be able to compare them directly. Otherwise, we're just making stuff up. We're just making stuff up. All right, cool. Last one that I want to look at, or last argument, but I've got about 5 or 6 different problems with it. So I want you guys, once again, to take a few seconds to read this one and really think about it, and then we'll talk about it. All right, so I think we're getting good at this, so I'm going to jump in and say, hopefully everyone agrees with me that the last sentence is the conclusion, and the only evidence given is that the 150 volunteers had a far lower incidence of colds and flu. Okay? Is this a good argument? What do you guys think? Yeah, I'd agree. It's borderline criminal how bad it is, right? It's borderline criminal. Yeah, who knows, right? There's a lot of potential problems with the study, right? There's a lot of potential problems, and that's a really good one, right? Were they self-reporting? Did they actually jog the 8 miles? Was someone actually looking at them, right? Here's a big problem, though. What kind of people are being studied here? Yeah, why do you think the subject pool was biased? Yeah, because they're people that are able to, right? And not just that, they're not just able to, but they actively volunteered. This is just really, really bad methodologically. You can't base a scientific study by having your group volunteer to do the activity. What you have to do is you divide the volunteers into 2 groups, one of whom does the activity and one of whom doesn't, right? But in this case, there's no way that those 150 people are representative of the population. And they're certainly not representative of the people that were in the general population in the other studies, right? So really, really big issue there. This crops up a lot. Anytime that you are given a sample, a study based on a sample, we looked at this group of people, and we determined this result. There's always the question of whether that sample is representative. Sometimes it's not clear whether it's a problem or not. In that case, you can say in your essay, hey, they didn't prove to me that the sample was representative. I want more data about how they chose their samples. I want more data about who these people were so we can tell whether it was representative or not. In this case, on the other hand, we actually have pretty good evidence that it's the exact opposite, that it's actually not representative. So that's even stronger, right? In this case, I wouldn't wonder whether it's representative. I'd point out right from the beginning that it's almost assuredly not representative. let's pause here for a second. Any questions? Does that idea make sense? Look for this issue where we're drawing a conclusion about everybody on the basis of a small or non-representative sample. What I said there, I actually gave away the next one, right? The sample is not just unrepresentative, but it's probably too small as well. 150 people, not really a lot. Now that being said, depending on how the statistics are run, 150 might be okay, but not if it's not a randomized double-blind sample. Yeah. I guess you can't really double-blind it because in this case the volunteers know whether they're going to jog 8 miles per day or not, but you can certainly randomize your selection of the sample. Yeah, absolutely. We don't know what the control group is. I'll skip to that one, right? We don't know what the control group is. The only control group we really have is the incidence of flu reported in the general population. That's not a true control group at all. What we need to do is take 300 volunteers and make 150 of them run 8 miles a day and make the other 150 not run, and then compare them. So we really, at one level, don't have a control group, or another way to put it is our control group is just the general population, and that is not a true control group. That is not a valid way of studying this. Oh man, Catherine's on a roll. I totally agree with that. I don't think I have a slide for that. Oh yeah, I do actually. This is exactly what Catherine's talking about here with the baseline data, right? We don't, oh no problem, you're gonna totally do great on these. But we don't even know how these people started out. We don't even know how these people started out. What if they were already healthier? In fact, we kind of can see they probably already were healthier simply because they're people able to run 8 miles a day. Could you guys run 8 miles per day? I don't think I could walk 8 miles a day right now, sadly enough. That's a lot. So they're probably already healthier people generally. And this comes back to a certain extent to the idea of our sample is unrepresentative. But what we need to do is not just compare these 150 volunteers to the general population. We need to compare them to themselves. We need to see whether they themselves were more likely to get colds and flus before they started running. Yeah. All right, couple more. Alternate causes. There's a big gaping hole in this argument that has to do with causality again. We don't actually have any idea that the reason they had a lower incidence of colds and flu than the general population was because of the running. Maybe they did the study at a time where people are less exposed to cold and flu, right? We just don't know. We just have no idea. And this comes back to one of the points we made a second ago, which is we don't have a control group. We can't compare it to a general population that's experiencing potentially very different cold and flu seasons, right? We can't make that comparison. We need to compare them to other people that were doing everything the same except for what we are attempting to study, running 8 miles a day. Okay, last one, and then we'll move on from this. Short versus long term, right? We only did the study for a couple of weeks. The conclusion is everyone should consider jogging 8 miles per day. Are we really all, everyone in the world, going to start running 8 miles a day every day for the rest of our lives just so that we have a little bit less cold and flu? I mean, if you enjoy running, great. I hate running. I'd rather get the flu than run 8 miles a day personally. I don't know about you guys, but we get this problem where we're taking a study that only lasted for a few weeks and trying to apply it long term to everybody forever. Yeah, that's another good question, right? This goes back to our nothing is quantified, right? They don't tell us how much lower the incidence of colds and flu were. They don't tell us why it's 8 miles a day instead of 6 miles or 10 miles. There's really no good explanation for the numbers that they do have, and they're missing a lot of other numbers. So we just found 6 problems with this one, plus there's some of the problems that we saw in some of the earlier ones. If you're careful in how you think about them, and you do a good job of deconstructing the argument, I promise you, you will never run out of problems in the argument. A bigger deal is having too many. You don't want to identify 8 different problems with it. You want to pick 3, maybe 2 very, very good ones and really explain them well. And that's, let's start wrapping up. Let's talk about an outline for this kind of an essay. You know, you want to restate the argument. You want to take an intro paragraph where in 2 sentences you do just what we've been doing all along, which is restate what the author's conclusion is, what the evidence is that supports it, and maybe paraphrase it, you know, to get at the root of how the argument's working. And then you want to establish your take. This is easy, right? Remember when we talked about the issue essay, you could be on either side. It doesn't really matter which side you take. But for these, the answer is always simple. Your take is this argument sucks, is flawed, has problems. I wouldn't use sucks myself. But the point is, it's a bad argument. Now, you might craft exactly how you phrase this based on the particular instructions given, the particular prompt given. You know, if they talk in the prompt about unstated, unwarranted assumptions, maybe you say your take is, this argument makes a number of unproven, unjustified assumptions. These assumptions, until evidence is provided supporting them, prevent us from accepting the author's conclusion, right? But maybe if instead they're talking about, you know, criticize the methodology, that's where our take would be, right? So we might change what we phrase here depending on the particularities of the prompt. But our take is always more or less some variation on this argument's terrible. This is a bad argument. And hopefully what you guys have seen is every one of them that we've looked at has been its own, has had at least 4 or 5 separate problems. Okay, so the body paragraphs, try to get at least 2. And each body paragraph should have one separate flaw or problem or piece of evidence that needs to be examined. One bad assumption, right? It all depends on the exact prompt. But what I see a lot when people write practice essays, what I see a lot from people are practice essays that are laundry lists. They try to list out 16 different things in one paragraph. It's not about quantity in terms of number of problems that you spot. It's about quality. It is quantity in terms of how long your essay is, but don't simply list out 1,001 different problems. Take the best 2 or 3 and take the time to really explain them, to write a fully formed paragraph around each of them. If possible, also, depending on the prompt, mention what it might take to fix that problem. But once again, that's a little bit dependent on the prompt itself. And finally, make sure that you have a conclusion. Re-summarize your critique. You're basically repeating what you said in the intro. That's fine. Just use different words. Paraphrase yourself. You got to have an intro and a conclusion. You can't get away with no conclusion. So what I do is I write the intro first, then I write the conclusion, then I write as many body paragraphs as I can in the rest of the time I have available. And if I only get to 2 of them, at least I've got intro, 2 body, 1 conclusion. If I get to 3 of them, even better. It'll be a longer essay, and I'll probably get a slightly higher score. But as long as I've got a good intro and a good conclusion and 2 body paragraphs in the middle, I know I'm going to get a decent enough score. I know I'm not going to get a bad score. Leave off the conclusion, and you can really hurt your score, because it's like you just flat out ran out of time. And that's, even though the people reading it are supposed to read it holistically, the conclusion's the last thing they're going to see. And if it's not there, they're really going to be biased against your essay. All right, questions at all? I've been talking a lot. You guys tell me, what questions do you have about these essays? Okay, none at all. Great. So style points, same thing that we talked about with the issue essays, right? Vary up your language. You know, use decent vocabulary, but make sure that you're using that vocabulary correctly. I'd rather you use lower level words correctly than really fancy words incorrectly, by far. But if you find a place to throw in a word like correlation does not in and of itself prove causality, right? Some fancy kind of academic, intellectual sounding phrase, that's great. That's great. And finally, length is important. So, you know, once you get that intro and that conclusion down, don't worry about perfection. Try to get as much down as possible. You don't want to write so that it is unreadable, right? Your grammar needs to be good enough that it's readable. But try to get as much down as you can in the 30 minutes. And the final point I'd make is don't stress it too much. It's not going to matter a great deal in the grand scheme of things. So final points to make. In the official guide, near the front, there are going to be sample essays and further insight into the scoring process. I would glance at a few of the sample essays just to get an idea for them, but I would not spend a lot of time looking at all of them. You can look at all of the topics online. And I'd once again do the same thing I do here, which is I'd glance at them, I'd read a few of them, but I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on that. And then send me and Liz copies of your essays, and forget this whole offer good 1 week only. We'll always grade essays if you send them to us. Sometimes we're slower, sometimes we're faster about getting them back to you, but you send us an essay, I promise you we'll give you our feedback on it. So that's it for essays. Questions at all before we switch over to some math for a little bit? All right, well in that case I'm going to turn it over to Liz, and she's going to do some math review with you guys for a little bit.
All right. Okay, great job of getting through essays. I think we may end up splitting our math review. A little bit before the break and a little bit after the break. I'd like to start out just with some QC, just to warm everybody up. Oops, let me get us back over to QC. Okay, these were just some fun QC problems. We're going to do them quickly using the timer just to get everyone sort of warmed up and ready to go. And then I'd like to try, if we have time, a few challenge problems. All right, although we may end up coming back to them. So everybody remember QC? I'm going to put up our polling for it, the A through D answer choices. Okay. Everybody get ready. Smile at me if you are ready for some QC. We're just going to run through these quickly, just to refresh what we've been doing for the past 9 weeks. All right, everyone but Jane is saying that here she is ready. Okay. Let's all get ready. Let's try this first QC just for fun. 1 minute and 15 seconds. Check it out. Okay, now here the correct answer is B. Do I have a volunteer to get on the mic and tell us why? Why is the correct answer B? Anybody want to volunteer? If you don't want to get on the mic, you can type volunteer. Why is the correct answer B? All right, this is trying to get you, okay, thank you, Catherine. We look at this, -1 to the q, -1 to the q plus 1. We have no idea of what q is. All we know is that q is odd, but why is that enough? Why is that enough? Catherine will tell us why it is enough. All right, and I'll put up the correct answer so everybody can see it. It's B. And if you didn't get that, my hint is look at this. What does this mean? What does this mean if Q is odd? If you want to change your answer, that's absolutely fine. All right, if you see it, if you see why. Okay, so Catherine's got it. Any negative number raised to an odd number will produce a negative value. So A has to be negative since Q is odd. Okay, so -1 to an odd equals -1. All right, but here Q plus 1 has to be even. Q plus 1 is even. So we have -1 to an even, which is just equal to 1. All right. Good job. Let's try another one. Okay. Let's see. Here we go. Here's a fun one. Try this out. Now this problem is challenging. Let's think about this, how this would work. All right, so let's just think about this whole average speed thing. Say I have a distance, okay, of 200 miles, all right, and I have a super fast car and I'm going to drive it at 200 miles per hour one way. And then the other way, I'm going to return, okay, so I go at 200 miles per hour. Okay, that would be my rate. Distance equals rate times time. Okay, and then I'm going to return. So how long is it going to take me, by the way, in my super fast car? How long is it going to take me to go there? Yeah, it's just 1 hour. Okay. So now think about it. What if I return, and it'll take 1 hour, that's my time. What if I return driving at 1 mile per hour? So I'm going to go 200 miles at 1 mile per hour. It's going to take me 200 hours, all right? So what's my average speed going to be? Is it going to be about 100 miles per hour? You know, if you're sitting in the car with me, are you going to have been going at about 100 miles per hour? What's my average speed going to be close to? All right. I go 200 hours at 1 mile per hour. Yeah, it's going to be really close to 1 versus 1 hour at 200 miles per hour. Okay. So this is an extreme version of the problem. But think about it. Think about what if, you know, again, try 200 miles. If she drives at 40 miles per hour going there, all right, she's going to spend 5 hours driving at 40 miles per hour. Whereas if she returns at 50 miles per hour, she'll spend 4 hours going at 50 miles per hour. So remember, this is a weighted average, all right? What's the speed going to be closer to? The average speed. She's going to drive for 9 hours. What's the speed going to be closer to? The 40 or the 50? Yeah, it's definitely got to be closer to the 40. Okay, so the correct answer here is B. All right, and I know this isn't intuitively obvious when you first look at it. Most people look at this and think right away that the answer has to be C. It's only by thinking about it okay, that you realize, wait a second, this is like a weighted average. She goes longer at the slower speed, okay? And remember, when we're thinking about this type of a problem, we always have to remember that the average speed equals the total distance over the total time, not the average of the two speeds, okay? And I always remember that, thinking of this, the 200 miles per hour versus 1 mile per hour, okay? That no, the average is not. If the average were 100 miles per hour, I'd complete the journey in 4 hours, and it takes me 201. All right, now, that was tough, so smile at me if you understand that one now. If not, please give me the Pepto-Bismol face, and we'll do some more explanation. Okay, all right, just a cool little trick, thing to remember. Okay, let's see. What else do I have in my collection? Oh, I have another fun one. Let's try this. Let's try this. Okay, try this problem. All right, not everyone has answered. Okay, now look at this problem. It has a couple of features that make me know that there's a trick. Why am I highlighting these giant exponents, 10 to the 11th and 3 to the 13th? Would I ever have to calculate something like this? What do you guys think? No, Catherine says. No way, says Caitlin. Okay, that should set off the "this is a trick" alarm bell in your head. Okay, there is a trick here. And so what I might do, faced with this, is rewrite. Okay, I've got 10 to the 11th divided by 2, right? And the remainder is what is left over. Can I divide 10 to the 11th by 2? Can I divide 10 to the 11th by 2? Yeah, I absolutely can. Think about it this way. It's just 10 to the 10th times 5 times 2, which is that extra 10. All right? So what's the remainder? What's the remainder? Anybody remember what's the remainder? Okay, so I just cancel these 2's. What's the remainder? What's left over? All right, Caitlin, you're typing. Tell us, what's the remainder? What's the remainder here? No remainder, exactly, no remainder. And when there's no remainder, that's a remainder equals 0. Okay, now, same thing with this 3 to the 13th. All right, let's just write it this way. 3 to the 13th divided by 3. What's our remainder going to be? Yeah, exactly. No remainder. Okay. So they're both equal. Has to be C. All right. Now I want to ask, only 2 of us were able to answer this problem. What made it hard? Where did we get stuck? All right, what made it hard? Let's do some analysis. What made this difficult? And how could we prevent getting caught by something like this? Not knowing what the trick was. Okay, Caitlin, what could you have done? What would you do differently now if you're going to leave yourself a note to self? Okay, you looked, okay, so Emma was saying, I took it as the remaining number rather than the remainder. Okay, so that was a definition. Okay, so Emma, the thing to do is to put, make flashcards of the definition. You definitely have to know remainder, quotient, product. All right, and Caitlin, you're saying, okay, Jane, okay, so flashcards with the definitions. They expect you to know that. But what about Caitlin's problem, not knowing the trick? Caitlin, how could Caitlin have known? How could she have known where to look for the trick? All right, anyone, can we think of a strategy to help Caitlin? Okay, this is what you should do every time you hit a problem that you don't get, and yet you realize later, oh, I could have gotten that. You want to think, what should you have done differently? Okay, so Caitlin is saying by breaking down the big numbers. All right, yeah, I think that's what we did, and I think the real clue to that is when the numbers are ridiculous. Okay, yeah, I like what Catherine is saying. That would have helped for the 10 to the 11th, realizing that anything that's a multiple of 10 has to be divisible by 2. Okay, I like both these points. All right, and I especially like noticing if a number is ridiculous, if a calculation is ridiculous, there's going to be some other way to do it with rewriting. Okay, a 3 being in the base and the remainder, yeah, Catherine has it exactly why these two would have no remainder. All right, absolutely. But I want to see earlier on even than that for Caitlin. I want you to see, oh, look at these numbers. This means I should rewrite. Numbers are ridiculous. I don't have to calculate, I should rewrite. Okay. All right, let's see. I have another one in my collection. Let's see this one. All right, here's another fun little problem. Try this one. Okay, correct answer here is D. Can anyone volunteer to tell us what should you do here? What did you do? Oh, wow, no, everyone has D. Fantastic. This is so exciting. All right, guys, what was the thing that you saw? What was the thing? Someone was holding out on me for an answer, and now everybody has it, and it's all right. What did you see? Yeah, Catherine has it. B could be positive or negative, absolutely. Or it could also be a fraction, but the positive or negative gives it right away, because then B squared has to be positive, but B could still be negative, changing the sign. Absolutely, awesome job. All right, let me bring on another rate problem. Okay, now the last one got us, but this one doesn't have to. Just think about it. All right, look at this rate problem, use that rate equation. All right, does everyone remember the rate equation? Type it in. Type it into the chat box if you remember the rate equation. What's rate equal? It's distance is rate times time. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, here you go. Try this one. All right, let's pull in those answers. One person needs to pull in an answer. Let's see the answers here. Time required to drive 2m miles at 60 miles per hour versus time required to drive 5m miles at 150 miles per hour. Okay, how do I set it up? Somebody tell me. Ah, good. Everybody has it. It's C. Awesome. What's the key? What's the equation that I would type in? All right, what's the equation? Using rates, how do I do it? I know that distance equals rate times time. What do I plug in? How do I do this? Okay, or time equals distance over rate, Catherine is saying. Absolutely fine. Okay, so yeah, the time is going to be 2m, which is our distance, divided by 60 miles per hour, versus the other time equaling 5m divided by 150 miles per hour. Awesome. Okay, awesome. So our time is 1/30. right, versus 1 over 30. There we go. Or 1m, sorry, m over 30. Put that m in. Okay, good job, guys. Everybody got it. Awesome. Okay, let's move on. I'm just like the GRE. You get it? It's over. Let's try something more fun, more challenging. Here, let's try a little bit of triangle fun. Ooh, everyone who's answered has answered correctly. Do I have a volunteer? I would love a volunteer to hop on the mic. There's one key realization for solving this problem. And I saw several people who started off with the wrong answer have an aha moment and get it. Anyone want to volunteer? All right, I guess I'll volunteer someone. Okay. Jane, are you able to get on the mic? Could you tell us what you saw?
So I actually made a mistake at first and thought that it said that angle ABC equals 120 degrees. But then when I realized it was only 20, I was able to change my answer. So if you add up all the angles, it has to be 180 degrees. So if angle ABC equals 20 degrees, then the other two angles have to add up to 160. So I thought, like, if one of them, if angle BCA is 100 and angle CAB is 60, then that would equal 40, so quantity B would be bigger. But if angle BCA was 150 and angle CAB was 10, for example, then quantity A would be bigger. So it was D.
So one thing, you got it, but let's take into account the fact that they told us that the triangle is isosceles. An isosceles triangle means that it has two sides that are the same length and two angles that match. All right, so there are definitely different ways to draw it. That was the key. That was the key point that you got. And you know the sum of the angles has to be 180 degrees. Okay, so what are the angles? Well, there are two ways to draw this triangle. If angle ABC is 20 degrees, okay, and I've labeled them incorrectly here, all right, it could be that this, let's see, that this is ABC, my first triangle, or it could be that my second triangle is ABC. I don't know if they're two sides, two angles of length of angles of measure 20, all right, or if there are two angles with measure 80. Okay, total number of angles, total number of degrees in the triangle has to be 180. So I could have this long pointy guy, all right, in which case the difference between the two angles would be 60, or I could have the short wide triangle, in which case the difference would be 120. And so that's how you realize it has to be D. Okay, but you also want to take into account this whole thing where it says isosceles. All right. But here it turns out, whether they said isosceles or not, the answer would have been D. But sometimes they're more clever than this. Okay, well done, well done. Any comments or questions on this one? Any comments or questions, any learning takeaways from this? Anyone? No? All right. I always think that the big learning takeaway is when they don't give you a picture, there's something that they're hiding. All right? And I always draw the picture, and I think about different variations. How could I draw it? That's my key for never missing geometry problems, is sketching pictures. They are very sneaky. Yes, Ian, absolutely. And this is a tip-off. No picture, trying to hide something. All right? Okay, let's try another one of these fun problems, similar to what we had a little bit of trouble with before. Take a look at this. Think about what you should do. How should you go about solving this one? All right, awesome, awesome. Now, how do you solve this? Do I have someone who's comfortable with how she solved this? All right. Correct answer is B. Okay. Do I have someone who's comfortable, who can volunteer? Ooh, everybody has it now. Awesome. Why is it B? What's the technique? You guys can just type it in. What's the technique? What's the thing you have to see to get to B? You would never have to calculate this. This is horrendous. Exactly. Jane has it. Okay, so you just rewrite. 125 is going to be equal to 5 to the third. Okay, so then I have 5 to the third raised to the 125, whole thing. Oh, what do? My exponent rules tell me, oh, I just multiply that 25 times 3. Yeah, exactly. Caitlin is saying it. It's 5 to the 75th. All right, awesome. Very nice job. Very nice job. Okay, so let's try something else then. We got it. Try this. Let's try another one of these geometry problems. All right, okay, I've got a lot of right answers here, okay? Now, the square of the length of side CD, why is that significant? Why is that significant? They tell me that the shape is a square and they want the square of the length of one side. What does that give me? Okay, what does that give me? Anybody? Oh, good. Everybody has the right answer now. It means all sides are equal, so that's the area of square. Okay. Now, what's the formula? Thinking about this one for the triangle. All right. What's the area of that triangle going to be? Yeah. Well, it's not 50, but it's going to be half, 50% of it, half the square equals 1/2 base times height, okay, equals half the area of the square. Awesome. So they're equal. Very, very nice. All right, I may have to ratchet up the difficulty level. We're having entirely too much fun with this. Let's see, what do I have in my collection? All right. Why don't we try this problem? Okay, let's try this. All right, I know you guys can do it, but this will make you think a little more. Here we go. Wow. All right. Thinking about this problem, I have a split among our answers. Okay, so A, B, C, and D are consecutive even integers. A is less than B is less than C is less than D. How could we solve this? How am I supposed to solve this? I have D minus C plus B minus A and D minus A plus C minus B. How am I supposed to solve this? Okay, can I figure out any of these quantities? What can I do? Anyone have a strategy for me? Okay. Catherine is saying I could test number scenarios. That would work. And Jane is saying that I know each number is 2 greater than the one before it. All right. I like it. I like it. Okay. So Emma, thank you. That's really practical. D minus C and B minus A have got to be 2 because they're just 2 apart. All right. I know these numbers are consecutive. Okay. So let's think about that. D minus C, that's 2. B minus A, that's 2, so this is 2 plus 2. All right. What about C minus B? That's going to be 2 as well. What about D minus A? What about D minus A? Yeah, Jane has it. The key is realizing, wait a second, D minus A. And you could think about it, consecutive even integers. You can just list out some examples, as Catherine said, but D minus A has got to be 6. All right, so the answer here is B. They're even. Yeah, exactly. They are consecutive even integers. Okay. What if they were negative? Okay, Emma, think about it. Even if they were negative, say you had, negative 8, negative 6, negative 4, and negative 2, the difference, all right, D, negative 2 minus 4, D minus C is still going to be positive 2, right? Just test it out. Negative 2 minus negative 4. Okay, now it was really insightful to think about it that way, to think, could something funky be going on? And then really helpful just to test and say, no, nothing funky is going on, it's just the distances. All right, excellent thinking and investigating. Good job. Good job. All right, so let's do another one of my fun problems. Okay, let's see, what do I have in my collection that would be fun for us? All right, why don't we try this little problem? All right, here we go. Let's try this in 1 minute and 15. Now this is a really interesting problem. I'll show you our answers. We're split. We don't know whether it's A or D. Okay, so let's think about our methodology. We know that N is between 625 and 1625. So how should we think about this? What should we do? What should our approach be? Somebody tell me what an approach is. I mean, I can't test every number between 625 and 1625. I don't have time for that. Okay, so Catherine is saying, well, how about 626 and 1624? Okay. All right. And that'll work. Okay. You could even test 1625.1 and 1624.9. They don't have to be integers. But here, if we just think about it, think about max and min. Min and max. All right. So if N is 626, then you have your 1,000 minus 626, okay, which I think is going to be 374. All right. And otherwise, if N is 1624, you have 1,000 minus 1624. Oops, 1624. Okay, and that should be negative 624. All right, and then here you try with negative 624 minus 1 equals negative 625. Okay, so in this case, we know it's either going to be A or D. All right, and then we try here. Okay, what if we have negative 1624 minus 1, all right, and then we have negative 1625, all right? So again, A or D, okay? All right, it isn't definitive, but it's sure looking like A. Does anyone have another method? What else could we do? There's another thing that we could do when we're looking at a QC. Look at these two. Okay, what do they have in common? Add n to both sides. Exactly. You can treat it like a giant inequality. If I add n to both sides, all right, then I'm going to get 1,000 and negative 1. And I can see that A has to be greater. Okay? I can see that A has to be greater. All right, questions? Questions or comments on this one? Looking at it now, if you got D, what do you see? What could you have done differently? Questions or comments? Okay. You panicked. Oh, Catherine, yeah, and that's something really important to take into account. You panicked. Panicked with diminished time. All right. One thing that I say that I find really helps me is that I tell myself, look, there are 4 methods. I can solve for X. I can test numbers and try to prove D. I can rewrite, or I can treat it as manipulated as a giant inequality. Okay, and I find that if I up front look at it and say, what am I going to do, and make myself first focus on this, I get myself doing something. Otherwise, if I see a hard one, if I don't pick, if I don't have a place to start, I waste time and I tend to panic with time running out. All right, so if you're experiencing that tendency to panic, try this. Remind yourself that there are 4 methods. I look at this, I can't solve for n. Okay, I could possibly test numbers. Rewriting doesn't look like it's going to make much difference, but I could definitely manipulate as a giant inequality. Both have negative n. I see that they have that in common. All right, and that turns out to be the easiest way because it would be really hard to prove. You can't prove D here. All right, although you could have gotten a pretty good idea that it'll probably work by testing numbers. Okay. Fantastic job. Very well done. With that, we have completed our math review. I am going to hand the mic back to Ian, who hopefully will give us a little break before we do our verbal review.
Yeah, I think a break is very appropriate at this point. Let us take 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and dive into some verbal stuff. So we will see you guys back shortly. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to do a little bit of verbal stuff for most of the rest of today. First thing I want to do is talk to you guys a little bit more about vocabulary. But before we do that, give me a smiley face if you're back and ready to go. All right, there we go. Okay, so the point of today's lesson is going to be to discuss how we can use words that we know the meaning of to help us determine or divine the meaning of words that maybe we don't know. We call this a potent penumbra. So let's define what a penumbra is. A penumbra in astronomy is a partial shadow in an eclipse. That's one meaning of it. And so when, let's say in this case, we have the Earth, and the Earth is actually in this picture being obscured by, the Earth is obscuring the moon. And so basically what's happening is the sun is coming from sort of where you are, going through the screen, and then striking the moon in the background. And if you notice, there's a direct dark shadow right where the Earth is. But surrounding that, there's a penumbra, kind of a partial shadow. And as the moon travels through that, we get more and more of an eclipse. The other meaning in astronomy for a penumbra is the outer spot of a sunspot. So this bright yellowish portion of the sunspot, the part that's really visible, that's the penumbra. And then this darker spot, that's the center of the sunspot, and is not the penumbra. So I think you guys are getting the idea. What we're talking about when we say penumbra is we're referring to something that's sort of surrounding, is the outer edge, is the shadowy part surrounding the middle. More metaphorically, one meaning of the penumbra is an area in which something is still there, but it's lesser, or it's uncertain. And here's a great quote from a judge about the First Amendment, a penumbra of privacy that's protected from governmental intrusion. In other words, the First Amendment doesn't directly state it, but based on what the First Amendment says, there's more things sort of on the edge to a lesser degree or a more uncertain degree that we can infer. And finally, just straight up, an outlying or surrounding region, the periphery of an area. So the point of all this is that what we want to be able to do is have these core words that we really know well, this vocabulary that we've studied intensively, words that we can precisely define, words that we can use in context, words that we have no problem recognizing when they crop up on the GRE. We also, though, need to be able to handle words that maybe we haven't seen or that we're less familiar with. And the point is, oftentimes we can use the words that we do know really well to help us infer the meaning of harder words. So this right here is a list of words that you guys may or may not have ever seen before. Most of them I would guess you guys have not seen, just a guess. And I want you guys to go through this list and see if there's words here that look familiar to you because of their relationship to words that you do know. So I'll get us started. Salutiferous, not a commonly used word at all. I don't know if I've ever personally run into salutiferous in anything that I've read or heard, but I can recognize that it appears to be related to the word salutary. And we all know that the word salutary means good for your health, or at least one of its meanings. So I can infer that the word salutiferous probably has something to do with healthiness or healthfulness. Describing something as salutiferous means that it is healthy, that it's healthful. That's the idea here. Okay, so here's what I want you guys to do. I want you guys to search through these two columns of words. There's 9 left, and see if you can identify any other words based on your knowledge of a related word that you know well. And as soon as you see one, start typing it in, and we'll go through them all together. We'll kind of all do it at once and see what we come up with. So good luck. Start typing. Okay, Catherine's got the first one. Didascalic probably is related to didactic. I agree, 100%. So Catherine, what do you think didascalic means then? Yeah, having to do with teaching. It's actually a pretty close synonym for didactic, which means intended to instruct, having to do with teaching. Absolutely. All right, I see Caitlin typing. Emma, Jane, what do you guys have? Caitlin's giving us placatory is related to placate. Agree with completely. Placate means to appease, so placatory is a descriptive word intending to placate, intending to appease, intending to make peace. Absolutely, good job. Keep going, guys. Emma, Jane, I don't see any typing. Catherine's got arcanum, good call. Arcane or arcana, which would be the noun form. So what do you think arcanum is then, Catherine? Based on its ending, yeah, do you think it's an adjective, a noun, an adverb? All right, James giving me jocosity, having to do with jocular, jocund. Absolutely. So Jane, what do you think jocosity means then? Yeah, joking. Yeah, absolutely. Joking around, state of being jocular, humorous. Emma, you've got it. Excrescence comes from excrete. So excrete is the verb, excrescence is the noun. What do you think an excrescence is based on the meaning of the word excrete? Good call. Sedulity comes from sedulous. Sedulous would be the descriptive word describing someone as hardworking, so sedulity would just be diligence, hard work. It would be the noun form as opposed to the adjective form. Good call. Good call. Emma, what do you think excrescence is if it's a noun form? That's a good thought, but it's actually not removing waste. It's something that is excreted, especially by the body. Something that is an excrescence is an outgrowth, something that's growing out of the body, especially something that's abnormal or ugly. So a zit would be an example of an excrescence. Yeah. Okay, coming back. Oh, I never uncovered arcanum. Yeah, so it's the noun. It's similar to arcana, something that is mysterious, but it's more precisely a secret or a mystery. All right, I got 1, 2, 3 remaining. Nobody has any ideas? Out of the remaining ones, the easiest one is probably fructuous. Yes, something to do with fruit, fructose. The meaning, though, isn't sweet, although that's often thought. The meaning is the meaning that comes from the idea of fruitful. Fruit in the sense not of sweetness or sugar, but in the sense of growing. So fruitful, fertile, profitable. Good call, Emma. I got 2 left, somniloquy and subfulgent. No guesses at all. All right. I'll give you guys the clue for subfulgent. It's related to the word refulgent. Now, if we don't know what refulgent means, then we're stuck, right? This process only works if we know a related word. If we don't know a related word, we're stuck. Does anybody know what refulgent means? Yeah, radiant, brilliant, shiny. So sub, think about the sub in front of it. Do you think it's shinier or less shiny? More radiant or less radiant? Yeah, absolutely. Only slightly shiny or resplendent. Only one left, guys. Somniloquy. Any thoughts at all? That SOM. No, it's actually not soliloquy. Good guess, though. Very good guess. Where do we see SOM show up a lot? Anybody ever read Brave New World? Anybody ever read Brave New World? The main drug in Brave New World that they made all the people in the nation take was called Soma, because it made them sort of quiet and peaceful and happy. The idea here is that SOM often has to do with sleepiness. And so it's that sound part and also the LOQ. Oh, I'm sorry. Caitlin actually said soliloquy, and I totally shot her down, and that's actually correct. I misread that. I'm sorry. But we've got that SOM that has to do with sleep or sleepiness. And then we've got the LOQ, which along with LOC and VOC and VOX oftentimes have to do with speech, talking, speaking. So somniloquy is literally talking in your sleep. That's a good one, isn't it? Very clever one. Questions about any of these? What I'm hoping you guys are saying is that there is an ability to figure out a word that you may not have already known by seeing how it's related to a word you do know. Maybe it's a different part of speech, maybe it's a more complex version of the word, but it's definitely there. Of course, you're better at this if you know more basic words. If you know more, basic isn't the right word actually, because a lot of these are already good hard vocabulary words, but the more vocabulary you know, the more of these penumbra words you know, related words you know as well. I always feel like if I learn a new word, I've learned a new word, but I've also learned how to figure out a whole group of other words. So it's really almost like a geometric progression. Every new word I learn opens or unlocks my ability to understand even more words. And that's really cool. That's really cool. It's how you can turn the hard work of studying 300 or 400 or 500 vocabulary words into the benefit of knowing potentially thousands of new words. That's fantastic. All right, let's see another example of this. This one's going to be a little bit more straightforward, I think. These are words that you usually hear in reverse, words that you're probably pretty comfortable with already in their reverse form, in their negative form. So for instance, I'll give you guys the first one again. Here I have the word licit. Well, the word that I'm used to saying is the word illicit. Illicit means illegal, so I can guess that licit means legal. Okay, pretty straightforward, right? How many of you guys have ever actually seen the word licit used? Maybe not. But all of us have probably seen illicit, right? Illicit behavior, right? Used in the news or in a variety of other sources. And so knowing that illicit means illegal, I can see that licit must mean legal. Okay, there are a bunch of others of these, quite a lot actually. We're going to do the same thing we did on the last page, but let's see how fast we can do this. Let's see if we can get all of them in 5 minutes. So you guys start typing. The first one you see that you know, give me the reverse or the opposite word that you do know the meaning of, and therefore what you think this word means. Okay, Emma's giving us unseemly. So what does seemly mean? Jane's giving us insipid. So what does sipid mean? Jane, yeah, absolutely. Having a pleasing taste. Insipid literally means having a dull or boring taste, but it's come to mean more broadly anything that's sort of undistinguishable, normal, boring, dull. Yeah, good call. Keep going, guys. So Emma's giving us good taste. Yeah, unseemly behavior is bad taste. Seemly would be decorous or appropriate. Yeah? Explicable, absolutely. Inexplicable. So what does it mean, Caitlin? Yeah, explainable. Perfect. Jane's giving me vincible, invincible. So what does vincible mean, Jane? And Catherine gave me indelible. So delible is unpermanent. Impermanent might be the better form of it. Good call. Invincible, vincible. Yeah, able to be, not exactly hurt. What does vincible actually mean? Invincible. Doesn't mean you can't be hurt. It does, but broader it's about defeat. So Emma's giving us inscrutable from scrutable. Yes, inscrutable. What does that mean? You guys are doing good, but we still got over half of them left. So yeah, good call, Emma. Something that is comprehensible, understandable. Pervious to impervious, good. So Jane, what does it mean? Catherine's giving me impecunious means lacking money. So pecunious means having money or being rich. Immaculate from immaculate. Okay, good. Keep going. Tell me the definition. Looking for we've got the words for pervious and for immaculate. Yeah, able to be penetrated. Also, open to new ideas, same idea. Yeah, immaculate means perfectly clean, so immaculate would be untidy, spotted, stained, tainted. Absolutely. Absolutely. One thing I want you guys to know, though, the word immaculate also has a scientific meaning, which is used to describe things that are spotted, whether they're dirty or not. So you'll often hear a tiger described as a immaculate cat. It has spots. Not a tiger, a leopard, sorry. A leopard, immaculate leopard. You might also hear a butterfly being described as immaculate if it has spots. Good job. We've got most of them done. Impeccable from peccable. What does impeccable mean? Yeah. Emma, give us what it means. Jane's giving us controvertible to incontrovertible. Absolutely, which means it's questionable. You can oppose it, you can argue it, you can question it. Very good job. You guys are good at these. Usually my classes really struggle with a lot of them. That being said, we still got a couple left. Trepid, Catherine, not exactly. You're on the right track, but not exactly correct. So Emma, what do you think peccable means if the opposite is impeccable? Yeah, problematic, but especially guilty or sinful, liable to sin. Yeah, absolutely. James giving us dubitable to indubitable. Indubitable, so dubitable would mean questionable again, something subject to doubt. Caitlin, absolutely. Incorrigible, correctable. Good call, yeah. Able to be made to change, right? Incorrigible means, man, they are just bad. You're never going to fix them. Okay, we've got a couple left. We're getting close to the end. We still got trepid out there. Catherine had a good guess at it, but wasn't perfect. It is intrepid, but intrepid doesn't have to do with safe or dangerous. It has to do with fearful or brave. Intrepid means brave, trepid means fearful. Intrepid, fearless, trepid, fearful. All right, what do I have left? 3? Domitable, supperable, and defatigate. And all of them mean similar things or are related to the same core idea. We're 1 minute away from it, 5 minutes. We got to get these through. Indomitable, yes, indomitable. So what does it mean? Not so much measurement, right? Domitable comes from the same root as dominate, right? Unable to be dominated, right? So domitable would be capable of being dominated, exactly. All right, 2 left. I'll give you the core portion of defatigate. F-A-T-I-G. Where else do you see that? Yeah, fatigue. Fatigue. Indefatigable means unable to be tired out. So defatigate is a verb form that means to make tired. I don't know. Probably most people don't feel the need to use that word often. He defatigated me. tired me out, right? All that hard work defatigated me. I don't know what that means. That seems an overly complicated way of saying the hard work made me tired. But that's the joy of English. We have all these complicated words, sometimes complicated words that mean pretty simple concepts. Yeah, James got it. Separable is inseparable, and inseparable means unsurmountable, cannot be overcome. So separable would be able to be overcome. I'm impressed, guys. That took us 6 minutes to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, to do 18 words. That's pretty quick. Most classes take a lot longer. So we didn't quite hit my 5-minute mark, but we hit it in 6, which is pretty damn good for 4 people. I've had classes of 10 people take a lot longer to figure all those out. Okay, I've got one last set. These are kind of fun. These are words that actually mean the exact same thing as the word that you're more commonly going to hear. And the concept here is that oftentimes con, per, and be do little or nothing to change the meaning of a word. So for instance, per fervid, what word are you used to saying that's probably related to this? Yeah, precisely, fervid, and it's exactly the same meaning, right? Very fervent, very impassioned. Okay, so keep going. How about congenial? What word are you used to saying? What does it mean? And what do you think congenial means then? All right, so genial, friendly, kind. Also gets along well with others is another meaning of genial. So what do you think congenial is? Remember, the word con doesn't, that root doesn't mean against or opposite. That would be contra. Con simply means with, right? In Spanish, con is with. It's similar in Latin as well. I don't know it in Italian. In French, it's avec, so it's changed a lot. But in Spanish, it's with. So this is basically saying with geniality, right? With friendliness, with kindness. So it means going together well. Oh, and Liz was telling me that in Italian, it's also con. Yeah. Okay. How about the next one? Pellucid. Any thoughts? Lucid, yeah, that's an easy one. So what does lucid mean? It means clear, and pellucid means the exact same thing. Occasionally you'll hear an argument that pellucid is usually more focused on the physical idea of being clear, letting light through it, and lucid is more often used in the more metaphorical sense, as in clearly articulated, easy to understand. But both words can be used in both the physical and the metaphorical sense, as far as I've seen. All right, here's a weird one, fuddled. This is the classic sort of switch that happens in Old English. In Old English, and even through Middle English, we oftentimes put the word be in front of a word to take a noun and turn it into a verb. So originally this word was fuddle, which just means drunkenness, and then it became befuddle, right, to be made drunk. And then we added the D, and we don't use it as a verb form. It's back to being an adjective, befuddled, confused, or drunk. So we're really going from the word drunk to be drunk to be drunked. We've gone from a noun to a verb to an adjective over the last 500 years. Does anyone actually use the word befuddle as a verb anymore? Do you ever hear anybody say, he befuddles me, right? His explanations befuddle me. Probably not. We probably use the word confused as the verb form, but we still use befuddled as the adjective to describe something. I'm feeling very befuddled today. Confused is probably how we use it today, but if you go back enough years, it actually was more to do with stumbling around drunk. All right, how about perambulate? And I'll give you this one a little bit of a clue. In England, perambulate is related to something that is related to something else that is shortened to the word pram. So if we're in England, what's a pram? Just a baby carriage. What do you do with a baby carriage? Yep, you walk around pushing it. And so this is ambulate or amble, which has to do with walking. Perambulate means to stroll or to walk. And it's interesting that in England, they take perambulate and they turn it into pram. What did we do in the U.S.? We took stroll and turned it into stroller. Isn't that cool how that works out? The synonyms, they're synonyms of each other, and both are changed to create the name of the baby carriage in exactly the same way, but using the different words to as the starting point. I don't know, maybe you guys don't think that's cool, but I think that's really cool, how a language like English can allow the same idea to be expressed, but in totally different ways. And then in England they do it one way, and here in the U.S. we do it a different way. Anyway, I think that's cool. All right, how about smirch? You guys are like, he's such a nerd. Yeah, Liz thinks it's cool. Everybody else thinks we're nerds. That's okay. We understand. How about smirch? Any ideas? No ideas on smirch at all? Yep, besmirch. Besmirch means to taint or soil or dishonor. And so smirch means the same thing. It's a verb that means to dishonor especially. Nobody uses smirch. Everybody uses besmirch. That being said, it would never surprise me if I ran into the word smirch on the GRE. All right, good job, guys, with these words. Are we ready to practice a few? Okay, I'm going to give you guys a minute. The first one we have is a text completion. So 1 minute, and I'll put up A, B, C, D, E for this one. Oh, no, I'll put up check marks because it's a 2 blank one. Good luck. Okay, good job. Everybody seems to have finished it right at the buzzer there. Caitlin, you were the first one to finish, though. So why don't you take over? Hop on the mic or type, either way. Tell me how you thought about this problem. Very good job. Very, very good job. The rest of these answers don't really make sense as something that would describe water. Can you have legal water? Maybe. I don't know. Can you have properly behaving water? I don't know. Very good job. Round of applause for Caitlin there. Anybody have anything different or want to talk about this further? Just give me a smiley face if you had the same answers Caitlin did. Very cool. And just to point something out, guys, you just correctly answered a problem with a whole bunch of words you've probably never seen before, just because you knew what some of the other words meant. All right, let's try another one of these. Here we go, 1 minute, once again. All right, guys, I don't have any. Oh, there we go. Finally getting some check marks. So, Jane, you are up. Walk me through this problem. Hop on the mic.
Okay, I'm not really sure about this one, but I kind of looked through. Oh, never mind. I only picked one word. I forgot that it was a two-word answer, or two-choice one. But the word, anyway, through the sentence analysis, the new CEO sought to prove his predecessor's presence entirely blank by redecorating the corner office, dramatically changing the management structure, and even firing the former CEO's most obvious lackeys. So I thought the target would be the new CEO, and it sounds like the things that he's doing are pretty, I don't know, kind of trying to, I guess, not like the nicest things. So my blank were maybe like immoral, or so I picked impeccable because I thought impeccable kind of meant the opposite of that. But I'm still not really sure about it, and I'm not sure about the second one.
Okay, anybody else? I think you've got some good ideas there, right? Changing, I think, is really important, right? Dramatically changing. To prove his predecessor's presence entirely immoral. Obvious lackeys. So my problem here is that with immoral is, are there any words in here that are synonyms or clues that mean that the predecessor was actually bad? Not bad in the sense of a leadership, but bad in the sense of being, you know, immoral or being unethical. There are words about unethical. Now, I mean, we've got lackeys, but that doesn't make you unethical. That just means you're, you know, that just means you're potentially not all that great. Yeah, and that's probably better. Show that the former CEO was obsolete or not needed, or, you know, all these changes are to get rid of everything the former CEO did. And actually the answer bit ends up being exactly what Emma and Catherine said, right? Delible means unpermanent. Impermanent can be erased. Effaceable means it can be erased, right? And that's our pair. Remember, two answer choices, guys. We've seen enough of these that we should remember how they work. Yeah. Questions at all about this? Is there another pair of words that are a synonym, that are synonymous, I should say? Remember, on most of these, we'll get two pairs of synonyms and then a final pair of unrelated words. So effaceable and indelible both mean that they can be erased. What's the other pair here that means the same thing? Well, let's double check that. Scrutable means able to be examined, able to be seen, able to be understood. Dubitable means able to be doubted. Oh, silence from the room when I said that. Okay, think about this. Transform these words like we did into their opposites. Incontrovertible, impeccable, inscrutable, indubitable. Which are synonyms? Test, test. Anybody out there? Can you guys hear me? Okay, so everybody's thinking deeply about my question then. Okay, good. I was worried that I'd lost my microphone. So just to restate it, if I were to give you guys the words incontrovertible, impeccable, inscrutable, indubitable, which two of those four words are synonyms, or at least similar? No, not scrutable, impeccable. Inscrutable means it is unable to be understood. Impeccable means it's perfect in behavior. All right, how about controvertible and dubitable? What does incontrovertible mean? So that's where we're running into the problem. We don't know controvertible or incontrovertible. I got it. Now I see where the issue is. So controvertible has the same root as controversy. So controvertible, or maybe the easier word is incontrovertible, means there's no controversy about it. It is absolutely true. You cannot argue against it. The incontrovertible truth. You can't argue against it. It's guaranteed. And dubitable has to do with whether something is able to be doubted. Indubitable means unable to be doubted. It is indubitably true. It is incontrovertible. They're actually good synonyms. And then peccable and scrutable, one has to do with behavior, the other one has to do with clarity or understanding, and they're not related. So we get our classic two pairs of synonyms and then two unrelated words. And in the end, our answer is effaceable and indelible, because they both have to do with being able to get rid of, delete, remove the previous CEO. All right, tough one, very tough one. Let's try another one though. Let's give this another minute. Before we do though, any questions at all? Okay, 1 minute coming up on the next problem. I'll put up A through E for this one because it's a 5-answer text completion. Good luck. Oh, I love it. Everybody finished on time and everybody got the right answer, even though this is a really hard group of words. Catherine, just tell me how you thought about it and we'll move on to the next one. Good job. Very good job. And I'm assuming that everybody had a very similar approach that allowed them to get to this answer. So round of applause all around. Good job, guys. Very good job. There's another word in here that I think is actually pretty helpful as well. It's the word inculcate. What does that word mean? Anybody know that word, inculcate? Okay, so I'll give you guys that one. Inculcate means to indoctrinate, right? Which means to teach by repetition, right? You get someone to know something by repeating it to them over and over and over again. Yeah, and so that's also another clue that tells you that it's some sort of teaching, right? The interesting thing about this is as soon as you use the word inculcate or indoctrinate, all of a sudden it takes on a slightly more sinister meaning, right? A slightly more negative meaning than it would have otherwise. But very good job. And I apologize for the noise in the background. It is all of a sudden pouring down rain outside. So I hope you guys can still hear me okay over the sound of the rain. I don't know if you caught that last message. I'm actually on vacation in Costa Rica right now, and it's the middle of the rainy season, so it rains really hard here for about an hour every afternoon. All right, I've got one or two more I want you guys to do here. Let's try one more, and then we'll do a couple of the argument style ones, and then we'll start wrapping things up. So here we go, 1 minute. Once again, good luck. Okay, this one gave us a little more trouble, but I think it's a classic example of a clue and a pivot. So what's the clue here? Okay, what's the pivot then? If we don't know the clue, what's the pivot here? The really obvious one. Okay, so we've got this idea of how we write a passable essay versus what we have to do to write a superb essay. Those are actually, I would call, the targets, right? What word tells you how you write a passable essay? What's connected to passable essay? Now we've got it, right? And our blank is what is required for a superb essay. So what does pith mean? All right, so we've got the essence, the main point, the central portion, the gist of it. So to write a superb essay, we need to know the pith, but we need also to know everything beyond that, right? So what do we need to know? We need to know what's beyond the center, right? And which of these words means not the center, but the edge, the additional stuff? Yep, that's it. That is it. And so that is bringing this lesson full circle. Full circle, because we started talking about what a penumbra means, and we ended talking about what a penumbra means. Absolutely. Good job. You guys, everybody got almost all of the questions we did correct. Really well done. Really happy to see how far you guys have progressed with not just your vocabulary, but also with your process for answering these questions and your ability to use your vocabulary, as we saw today. Use your vocabulary to help you solve problems involving other words, related words, maybe words you don't know as well. That is great. So continue to study, right? Up until the day of the test, I don't want you guys to burn yourself out trying to memorize 1,000,001 vocab words, but I do want you guys to continue to study vocab. If you finish our vocab list that I've been emailing you every week, you've also got additional words in some of the other books that we've sent out and in the flashcard series online. This is great. The more vocabulary you know, the better off you're going to be. If you've learned 300 or 400 new words and you can apply that to another couple of hundred words that are related, your score on the verbal side is going to go way up. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. If you can learn even more, it's going to help even more than that. So keep your schedule up. Even though we are no longer going to be sending out a word list every single week, try to see if you can keep the same schedule in place. Up until now, every week I've given you guys a list of 49 words. That's 7 a day. See if you can continue to learn 7 a day for however long you've got left until you take the real test. Flashcards, of course, always great, right? Always great. Don't just focus on your text completions or sentence equivalence problems. If you find words that you don't know in reading comp, look those up as well. And number 7, right? Enjoy having a great vocab for the rest of your life. Once you really make these words yours, so that they stop being really vocabulary that you've learned, but that they're a natural part of your language, that you can use them effectively in speech or in writing, that's great. And it's going to really stand you in good stead when you get to grad school and beyond. People will really respect your ability to communicate effectively. It's fantastic. It's not about sounding smart just because you use a fancy word. It's about being able to explain to somebody else a complicated idea using good language to make it very clear. And that's where vocabulary comes in. That's what's really great about it. All right, but I will get off my high horse, and I'm going to turn it over to Liz for the last part of today's class. But before we do that, any final questions? Okay, so we are going to talk about what to do between now and the day of the test. Take it away, Liz.
Hey, thank you so much, Ian, and thank you for that lovely verbal review. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about this, preparing to face the GRE, but as you may remember, I just recently took the new GRE, so I am happy also to talk about what it was like, what I found, both relative to the old GRE and to the new GRE practice exams and the Manhattan GRE practice exams. Okay, so first thing, let me just remind you of the format. When we take the new GRE, you start off with the 2 essays. They're 30 minutes long. And then you actually have 5 sections, okay? This unscored verbal or quant section, what I got was a quant section, all right? You do get a break. You get a break after your first, let's see, after the 2 essays, those are 2 30-minute sections, and then after whatever section you get first. All right, you'll get a little 8-minute break. Wow, very exciting. But take it, because then you have to come back and do 3 more sections. Right now, they're not giving us these scores yet. They're giving you 50-point score ranges, so my score was 750 to 800 rather than these scores. The 130 to 170 range is new, and they haven't calibrated it yet, so you don't see even a projection. And of course, you don't get your essay score until several weeks after the test. All right? Other things to think about your time guidelines. Even with the new review feature. How many of you know what I'm talking about? How many of you have tried a practice test with the review feature? Smile at me if you've tried the review feature. All right, if you haven't, go try it now. The review feature is nice, but put an answer in before you continue on. On the advanced quant section, I did not have time to review, and I was very fortunate that I had put in answers. All right, don't assume that you will have time to review. I did on when they gave me the first sections, the easier ones, but as I got the harder ones, I really didn't. So this is a nice feature, though. If you're really stuck with something, just pick any answer, pick a letter, and mark it for review, and then you can come back. This is a really nice way to keep yourself from spending too much time on problems. Okay. Other thing I noticed was that the DI section seems to be easier, definitely easier. All right, so these questions are not so hard. But quantitative comparisons and discrete quant are very much like what I saw in all the practice tests. Okay. Verbal, text completion, sentence equivalence. These questions are, what we've been doing in class is towards the harder end of these questions. You'll find that your first section, the medium section, will be easier than what we've been doing in class. And the methods really, really work. The fill in the blank first and then look at the answers is very helpful. I did have one text completion where there weren't really a lot of clues, and I had to use the answers themselves, their reference to each other when where I had to fill in 3. All right, and you're really going to need your skills for reading comp, where you have about a half a minute per problem. I only got one hard long passage per section. Okay, and I would say that I was really glad that I had created a little bit of an outline so I could figure it out more quickly and answer the questions more quickly. But there was only one of them. I know I've been asked that before. All right, so this whole thing, first section you get is going to be one of the medium ones. And then you get an experimental. I got an experimental quant, but I didn't know. I couldn't tell. I got 2 medium quants and 1 really hard quant. and I could tell the difference between the two, but not until I was several questions in. All right, so even if you get, and I started to panic, by the way, when I saw the second medium section, I started to panic. But either my first or my second one was, I'm sure, an experimental section. So don't panic if you get what looks like an easy section. It's probably your experimental section. All right, everybody with me so far? Smile if you're with me so far. There's still a lot of overlap in the sections, by the way. The medium wasn't, I couldn't really tell what was hard until I got to the end and I evaluated the number of hard problems. There's quite a wide range of difficulty of problems in both medium and hard. Okay, so these things, I can't emphasize this enough, this whole thing about don't leave anything blank. You may not have time to come back. This mark feature, this flag feature is wonderful, but use it more along the lines of, gee, this one is hard. I don't see how to get started. I'm going to pick a letter, and then I'll come back to it. All right? So pick a letter that you're going to pick now. Maybe you might like B, or maybe you might like C. I don't know, but pick a letter and then come back. Don't leave things blank. Okay, so far, big picture, we've been talking about how to build our foundations. We've been really discussing learning, we've been thinking about process, all right, we've been discussing content, we've been discussing process in class, in our strategy guides, in our handouts, you know, going through problems in the official guide and taking online practice exams. We've been trying to get better in all ways at the GMAT. Now it's time for another phase, though. Once you're done studying and you have, you know, somewhere between 10 days and a week left, okay, once you're really done, you've finished your post-course roadmap, you've run an assessment on the last 3 exams, and you've gone through and you've reviewed everything here, everything where you were below 50% in terms of accuracy or where you were slow, all right, once you've done this, it's going to be time to switch to taking these power prep exams. Okay, they don't have answer explanations unlike the Manhattan prep tests, but you want to be practicing with these real exams at the end. But if you have time, how many of you, by the way, already have dates for the GRE? Smile at me if you have a date, if you actually have signed up. Okay, what are the dates? What are the dates? Let me know so I can tell you about what it means to have time. Okay, if it's going to be very soon, early September, okay. All right, so if you have more than 10 days, you have time to make more flashcards. If you have a week or more, you have time to do a little more of this. If you have less than a week, Catherine, are you within a week? You do not have time for this, all right? You're not within a week? Okay. If you have less than a week, first week of September, okay, then you do have time to flashcard things. I'm going to strongly encourage everyone to flashcard tricky math problems. A lot of people were missing QCs due to not seeing tricks, not thinking through it. And if you flashcard it and remind yourself there are only 4 techniques, which one am I going to use? And many problems, you know, on many problems, 2 or 3 techniques will work. All right, so it's not critical that you know, on the first guess, get the right one, but you need to start doing something because you don't have a ton of time. And that's what these flashcards will really help with. What do you need to recognize and see to go to the right technique? All right, and vocab, you can still be learning vocab, as Ian said, but there will come a point when you're getting really close, and I would say your last test, if you're 2 weeks away, take one of these power prep exams. Now, at this point, if you're taking it early in September, you could switch to the power prep exams now. If it's going to be later than that, save them. All right, but if you're taking it in the first half of September, time to switch. You need to assess your progress and figure out where you are now. Okay, and that would be the best way to do that is to use the assessment reports on the website. How many of you have already done this? How many of you have used assessment reports to see where you are? Smile at me if you've used assessment reports to see where you are. All right, if you have taken a practice test, please, please try the assessment report and see where you are. This is such valuable information. It can guide you if you're still in the study phase, if you have more than 2 weeks. It can guide you in terms of helping you focus on what to study. But if you have less than 2 weeks, all right, sorry, let me go back to that. If you have less than 2 weeks, it's even more important, and I'm going to explain why. Okay. Now, just want to point out that you have access to all your online resources for another 90 days minimum, and you can get extensions from student services. Just call in and ask for an extension if you need it. I'm going to encourage you to try and get the test taken within the next 90 days because no one can study GRE forever. Okay. These blogs and forums are great for keeping in touch with people now that you're no longer in the class. It's nice to have only Ian and I and Sean and some of the other Manhattan instructors can study GRE forever. Everyone else will eventually get sick of it. So you want to take the test while you're still fresh. Okay? All right. Stay fresh. Ian and Sean are laughing at me. They know it's true. They could study it forever. Okay? But you can keep going for a good 90 days if you need a little more time. Okay? What we want you to do, all right, is use your practice exams to predict where you're going to end up. Okay? You can't expect magic to happen. If you're scoring, you know, at the 50th percentile, whatever scoring system you've got going, whether it's the 140 to 170, you're not going to suddenly be scoring at the 90th percentile. You want to realistically evaluate where you are. The practice exams, everything we've been finding is that they're dead on for score prediction. Okay, I got the same score in practice as I think I got on the real thing when it gave me my range. Exactly. And we've had a lot of students hitting dead on. Okay, so, you know, look at the average over the last few scores in order to predict what you're likely to get now. This may help you decide that you need to take it sooner rather than, you know, you're ready to take it now, or you may need to wait a little bit. Okay, because you're going to reach a point, though, when you don't have any more time to learn content, when it's time to change your strategy away from a strategy of content focused and learning and towards a strategy of developing a game plan, which means how do you get the best possible score out of the knowledge you have now. This is more your test-taking strategy, all right? And those of you who are taking it at the beginning of September, you're not quite there, but you'll be here soon where you really need to think about your game plan. And you can push it a little on the 2 weeks, maybe 10 days to a week out, but you really can't push it more than that. And when you get here, by the way, you're done with practice tests. You should take no more practice tests. Let me say that again. No more practice tests after you switch over to working on your game plan. Okay? Within about a week of the test. Maybe you could take one right at the beginning. All right? But when you're getting right up to the test, all they do is stress you out. They're not actually helping much. Okay? What you want to do as a result of these last couple of practice tests that you take before your game planning is figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are so that you can develop a strategy for every problem type so that you can know when to bail. You should bail sooner on problem types that have been really tough for you in the past, where you're less likely to get a correct answer. You've got to rehearse your pacing plan and your guessing strategies. Okay, and the reason, you know, I say take one last practice exam, that last practice exam is for practicing your pacing. After you've practiced pacing in, you know, a couple of sets of problems, try it with the actual exam. Try using that little thing to mark and continue to guess on the toughest problems for you in any section. No problem is worth more than any other section, is what we're finding in the scoring. So you should just guess if you get stuck rather than running out of time. Rather than running out of time due to spending too much time on a problem. Okay, so that's what this will help you with once you've game planned. All right, now the way you can think about it is this is reallocating seconds. Okay, say you're really good at exponents and you're not so great at rate problems. You should invest more time in exponent problems because you're more likely to solve them with that extra time than you are to get rates problems. If you don't get rates problems by now, by the time you get to this week before the test, nothing huge is going to change. But you're quite likely to be able to figure out harder exponents problems if you get exponents with just a little extra time. Okay, these are time trade-offs. These are the kinds of decisions that you have to make. On your first pass through the test, you could certainly guess on everything that's really difficult. But if you have time left over, spend that time on your strengths. Focus the time on problem types where you're likely to be able to answer correctly. In order to do this, you have to have chosen your battles beforehand. You have to have a list. Everybody should be able to list out, what do I do well, what do I not do so well, before going into the final test. Okay, and the way to get that data is your analysis of the practice exams, using those analysis tools. That's why these tools are so very important. Good strategy going in is easily, on the old scale, I would say easily worth, 50 points per section. Just good strategy without any difference in content knowledge. So you definitely want to have the information that you need to practice a good strategy, and you want to have tried it at least once before you take the test. What do you do in your final week? I would say just sort of low-key reviewing. All right, you really want to be done with practice tests, and you want to be winding down. Much as someone would wind down, would reduce the intensity of workout, say someone who's running and training for a marathon. In the week before the marathon, you're doing review, you're building your confidence, but you don't want to be tiring yourself out, especially if you're not taking time off from work. All right, you want to be just sort of getting yourself in really good shape and ready to take this exam. Okay, and reviewing your flashcard deck. That would be a great thing to work on, to go through tricks so that you're faster at remembering what trick to use with what type of problem. That's a really good activity for the last week. So final words of wisdom, things to take away. Get to the test center early. All right, you don't want troubles with parking or stress because you couldn't find the right door. When I went to the test center in Austin, I had to circle the building to find the door. I overshot it. Ended up circling around the parking lot. But I was early, so it was just entertaining. It wasn't stressful. Okay, know your logistics, get the map, figure out where it is. You can call them in advance if you don't know about it. I had two choices of test center, and I chose to take my test at the one with parking because I know that not being able to find parking stresses me out. Okay, other thing, take your breaks. It really helps. They give you the long break after the third section that you take, but they also give you 1 minute between each other section. You can leave the room if you want to. You're not supposed to. You don't really have time. But it's enough to just sort of put your head down for a moment, clear your head, and I found that very, very helpful. Other thing to do when you're out taking your break, get a new booklet, get new scratch paper. I had 3 math sections, and I did run out of scratch paper, and I had to ask for more. And I had to sort of wave at the woman outside the room to make eye contact to get it, and I did get it during, just as I had come back in during one of my 1-minute breaks. All right, positive mindset throughout, don't engage in self-sabotage. All right, it's very, very important to keep yourself positive and into it. Yes, it's long, yes, it can be tiring, but if you just focus on what's in front of you and you don't worry so much about it, really get your mind to focus on the problem in front of you, you'll do much better. You'll have a much easier time with it. Okay, so all of this stuff about not burning yourself out, altering your normal routine, you know, don't worry about the trajectory and don't add to your stress. Don't create stress. We create stress. Really try not to create stress. One way to create stress is to have your cell phone ring during the exam. They want you to put your cell phone in a locker, turn it off, because they will call you out if your cell phone starts ringing. And don't touch anything in that locker. Don't touch the cell phone. If you're going to touch something, maybe water, maybe some food. Some people can eat during the test, and that might give you renewed energy. I never find that I have the ability to eat during this test, but I usually can drink a sports drink. Okay. You guys are going to be really prepared, much better prepared than most people going into this test. So just focus on doing what you've been doing in class and in practice, and it's going to go fine. All right? You've been a great class. Ian and I have really, really enjoyed you. And we want to wish you the best of luck. Congratulations. Here's a gold star. We are nerds. Oh, you're so welcome, Jane. Let us know how you do. Email us. Tell us how things are going. You know, if you need help figuring out if you're ready, email us. Let us know. We are here to help, and we're still able to help with the essays. Just let us know if you need our help. We're so happy to work with you. We really, really enjoyed teaching this class. Ian, I'm going to hand you the mic back because I'm sure Ian also wants to say goodbye as well. This has been a fun class. Here you go, Ian.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liz. Yeah, really enjoyed working with you guys. Really happy to see how much everybody's improved. And just to mirror what Liz said, just because the class is over, that doesn't mean Liz and I completely disappear. You've got our emails. Please feel free. Any questions that you have, any problems, issues, even if you just want a pep talk going into the test, let us know, and we are very, very happy to help you out with whatever we can do. And other than that, congratulations for finishing. Congratulations for getting through all 9 weeks and putting up with Liz and I and our nerdiness. And we really, really appreciate having you guys in class, and we'll hope to hear great things from you. So I'm going to turn off the recording now, and thanks, guys. Really enjoyed it.